La, 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 la. I don't know what to say. I recorded 30 minutes and it wasn't shooting. This is what I get for trying to change up the system. Um, I am recording on my phone because I recognized I started this weekly diary with like very sharp, crisp, high quality Sony camera. And then I just got real lazy. But the lesson in that is this: if it takes sacrificing the quality to maintain the consistency, then it's worth it. But if the intensity of what you're trying to do compromises the consistency you're trying to maintain, it's not worth it. So I knew, especially at one point, I had been on like 7 flights in 1 week. And I knew that if I wanted to keep this going in totality, make it to week 52, which were 2 videos away, then I needed to find a system that worked best for me. And yeah, such a beautiful lesson in that. I am officially a full-time international citizen, and I think I'm still processing it. Oh, excuse me. I think this month, I mean, there's been a lot happening, obviously. Um, just the grieving, the hosting, the moving. It's just the compartmentalization of all that's happening in life is a gift. And I think just day by day, I don't allow myself to focus too much on any one emotion. And I just allow myself to have moments of like, oh man, it sucks that this is happening, and like, oh man, this is amazing, like I can't believe we're here, like, and oh wow, how beautiful the weather, so I just allow myself to move through the emotions as fluidly as possible without dwelling on any one, and without feeling shame for holding space for multiple. And that is the beauty and complexity of the human experience, is to hold multiple truths and emotions at the same time, and not be ashamed of any, and not feel like one emotion is better than the other. I think when you're with someone at a time of grief and loss, there's so much beauty in there's so much beauty in that. And that's been my lesson. I'm like, oh wow. And I think I'm at the age now, because I'm recognizing, not just Stefan, but with friends as well, that on any given week, there could be a pregnancy announcement, a divorce announcement, a miscarriage, and a loss, like a death in the family, and then someone getting a promotion. Like, there's so much. And I think even the complexity of holding space for grief is such a nuanced journey. And when I think about how I want to be supported during grief, it's not being overwhelmed with text messages and calls. Like, I actually don't want to talk to anyone when I'm grieving. Um, and I think learning how to learning how to show up for other people. Sorry. Learning how to show up for other people and not internalizing how you want to show up is a process. And yeah, it's beautiful work though. Like, this is the work of what it means to be human, and what it means to be a good partner and a good friend and a good family member and all the things. So yeah, that's been my work in this season. Um, I'm trying to think about just kind of wrapping up this year and what this journey has meant, because I've been rewatching these weekly videos, and it's been uh, it's been hilarious on one hand and like deeply cringeworthy on the other. And it's such an interesting thing to watch yourself observing yourself. It's like it's super meta, because I'm watching myself talk about myself while experiencing myself, and it's all of these layers of living and having such a detailed documentation of what this year has been for me. I'm like, man, this is some valuable stuff. And everyone thinks about like, one day a documentary is going to be made on my life, and I'm like, actually, I would love to produce that documentary myself, if even if it's just for me. And I think about how I have such raw footage of what something feels like in the moment that I'm feeling it versus trying to like recount, oh, how did I feel? And oh, I forgot what that was like. And let me look at my diary entry. Because, yes, a diary, and I love journaling, and that's probably why. A diary is one form of documentation, but this video recap and this video journal is also another one. And I think it's such a beautiful, transparent, and vulnerable thing to witness yourself living life and experiencing life and processing life in real time. And of course, this is for me, but y'all are out here watching me too. And it's the reason I don't make this a big deal. I don't overly optimize the titles, and I'm not trying to build a big funnel out of this, because essentially this is for me. And I think that's an important reminder for creators and other entrepreneurs is do things for yourself too. In pursuit of building this big business or big dream, make sure there's a part of your art that is just for you. And I've always maintained that since 23 years ago when I started posting on the internet. I want a corner of this to be just for me. People are welcome to consume it with me, but it's for me to look back on and remember and enjoy and reflect. And yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I am. A friend was asking me like, "Oh, where am I going to spend New Year's?" And I'm like, "I'll let you know when I know." I think one of the beautiful things about, I don't know, one of my favorite things about my life is it's so random. A lot of my trips and travels are decided a couple days beforehand, and that spontaneity keeps things exciting. So, yeah, we could be in Bosnia, we could be in Bangkok, and I love either option. I just love that we're taking it a day at a time and we'll see how we feel. And excuse me, ultimately, I'm just really enjoying this starting of a new family and starting of our own traditions. And yeah, it's just exciting, especially when you come from like a slightly traumatic family background, like I did. So that's been fun. I think when I look at just how I got here, it's interesting because I think about, yeah, I'm like a full, uh, I'm fully, I'm a full expat now, which in some ways feels like it was always going to be the goal. And I think about when I studied abroad, none of it was meant to happen. So I think the reason it feels like such a big deal is because I wanted to live abroad, but I also knew I didn't want to live abroad alone. And because there were so many years where I thought I was gonna not die alone, but I just didn't think being in a relationship was in the cards for me, because the kind of lifestyle that I lived and who I was on the internet, I didn't know if there were any men that were open to that life, but also secure being with someone who had that life. And yeah, it takes someone really special. I knew it was going to take someone really special to be with me. So if we just retrace, just very briefly, I was born in California. I went to high school in Arizona, college in Kansas, studied abroad in the UK, East Midlands, lived for a year and played semi-pro basketball in Barcelona, lived between, Vietnam, South Africa, London, Spain, Belgium, Argentina, Colombia. Like, I have all of these stints around the world where I've lived anywhere from 1 month to 1 year. And that was when I was a full-time travel blogger. And I didn't really know where home was. And I think whether you were a military brat or you just moved around a lot growing up, that sense of home, yes, it's internal, but you also want to find that external place that just feels like you belong. And I think the hardest thing was when I would go back to the Bay Area, and whether it was like for speaking engagements or work or anything, I'd meet up with like high school or childhood friends. And I tried so hard to compartmentalize or contextualize who I was in relation to who they were, trying to make it easier for them to make sense of what I did. And I constantly found myself like shape shifting to try to belong better. And of course, that stems from insecurity and feeling like, well, if I'm already misunderstood, and this is a whole another rabbit hole for ADHD, but if so much of your life you felt misunderstood, you desire so badly to just be understood. So I felt like, well, let me dim my light and yeah, not appear too big so that when I'm around them, they feel comfortable and safe. And it was the most interesting thing while I was blowing up on the internet. These people that knew me in class, I was a class clown, goofy kid, they no longer knew how to act around me. And their messages would start with this: I hope you remember me, or you might not remember me, and oh my gosh, and they would make me out to be someone that I wasn't. And it just was very awkward because I think some people, I don't know what it is about fame, perceived fame, I'll say, that changes how people think they should act around you. I don't know. So it was just an interesting journey. So I no longer felt at home with my people because they saw this, they knew who I was growing up, but then they saw this different version of me that was blowing up on the internet. And now they were like trying to make sense of like how they thought I wanted to be treated, which was like, oh, groveled at. And I'm like, no, please, if anything, humble me, because I'm not trying to be out here thinking I'm someone that I'm not. And so it was always very uncomfortable. So it made sense that I went to spaces where I was with other people that were big on the internet because they also understood that awkwardness. And so then you start hanging in those circles and you're like, okay, well, it's cool, but it still, still feels like a performance. And it's not that anyone is performing, but you feel like you just want a space to exist that has nothing to do with who you are on the internet. And whether those interests are around your faith, your love of travel, your love of sports, you're constantly trying to figure out, well, what is the unifier? What is the common denominator that I want to base my community and circle of friends around so that I can feel like I can just exist without this need to be who they want me to be on the internet or satisfy, I don't know, check a box like, oh, I might not be making sense, but I'll continue my rambles. So yeah, I think this desire to find a home has been longstanding. And when I wasn't sure of who I was going to be online, because I have pivoted often, I just knew that this creation thing, this entrepreneurial thing, the reason I have no competition, and this is not me saying people aren't better than me. There are, of course, amazing people that are 10 times better than me. But the reason I don't compete with anyone is because I does this. I do it for the love of it. There is no end result. Most people are very transactional about the reason they start a business, the reason they create art, the reason they upload a video on YouTube so they can get paid. And if you over optimize every detail of your creator journey, you will lose the fun of it. You will lose the spark. And at some point, everything is transactional. And when you are a literal geek of what you do and a student to the game and a student to your art, there is no there is no losing. It's the reason Taylor Swift and Beyonce, there is no other artist, unfortunately, that will be able to compete with what they do because they create their art for the creation's sake. They are artists for artist's sake, artistry's sake. You can't compete with someone who's addicted to their craft because they're not doing it for the billboards. They're not doing it for the charts. They're doing it because they are nothing without their music. I am so addicted to the experience and the process of creating art through my words, through what I put out on the internet, through the process of going through an experience and making sense of it to share the lesson online. That is what I'm meant to do, and that's what I love. And so I don't see others as competition. I see them as people also on their journey to make sense of their experiences, to create art out of it. And if everything is a monetization strategy, if everything is a funnel to growth and viral hacking, then at some point, you're never going to know what enough looks like. And I have figured out my enough number. I've figured out my enough lifestyle. And that puts me at a place that is safe and protected from the trends and the comparison that can happen with most people. Now, when I think about like my journey as a travel influencer and travel blogger, and I'm gonna check this because I'm like, I can't afford to do this video a million times. Okay, thank God. I'm like, please still be recording. Oh, okay. When I think about my journey as a travel influencer, travel blogger, full time from 2012 to 20, well, I guess you could say, yeah, 2013 to 2020. And interestingly enough, right before the pandemic, I felt this calling to just, I've had my fun. And mind you, this was a point where any given week I had 5 figures in my inbox, meaning brand deals, sponsorships, posts, things that I could do to earn 5 figures that week. Those were all inbound. And I was like fortunate enough that I started my travel blogging journey at a time where most Black travelers weren't visible. And I was very intentional about creating content that was geared towards helping other Black solo female travelers because I didn't see content for us. And when you're creating out of a need for yourself and for your community, there will always be room for you. So I was creating content that made my work very visible. And so pretty soon there's all of these articles, dozens of articles about top 10 travel, top 10 Black travel influencers or top 10 Black travel bloggers. And I was always ranked number 1, number 3, number 7. It didn't matter where I ranked on the top 10 list, I was just always ranked. And it wasn't even that, oh, I was so amazing. It was like there was 11 of us. So of course, 10 out of 11. So depending on how much I was traveling that quarter, like I was ranked higher because again, that visibility cycle of like, okay, I had just scaled or circumnavigated the world 3 times. So that's all of that content, all of those photos, all of those videos, all of that promotion and marketing like that, it was selling myself for me. So sometimes when you think about, people who are trying to go viral or trying to be seen, it's like you have to do it before you reap the rewards from it. It's not always so transactional where I'm going to post this in order for it to reach millions of people. It rarely works like that. Definitely not now. It rarely worked like that 10 years ago. Definitely doesn't work like that now. So you have to really play the long game. And I was always very intentional about, I'm going to also go places that Black people aren't traveling. So when I was in Romania and Bulgaria and Russia and Poland, like Black people were like, you sure we can go there, Chloe? I was like, don't worry, I got you. I'll find out. And I would just share my honest experiences in Latvia, in Estonia, and just the random, quirky, interesting things that would be said to me as a Black solo woman. And that in itself was like marketing gold because it was just the content was so shareable because there was no one else that was having this experience, especially as a Black woman in Estonia in 2014. So it just was so, anyways, tangent, but I was like shooting commercials for GoPro in Hawaii, working with like cruise ships a sailing company in Finland. And like, it was just such random work because it felt like I'm like, how else and when else will this happen? Yes. I said yes to everything. And pretty soon there was like speaking opportunities that got sprinkled in there. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm a speaker too. And I was just doing things that I never planned on. But when you put yourself out there, opportunities are presented to you and you get to decide, am I ready to grow? Because if you're only doing what's comfortable and easy, at some point you will plateau and you will fall by the wayside. Because we can guarantee that the landscape of social media and the internet is changing. And that is no matter what, that will always be happening. So you have to decide how much of that change am I going to be proactive in by choosing change versus responding to the change that's happening. So I was always very intentional about saying, I'm going to choose this change because at least I can control it versus wait for change to happen and then complain about the algorithm like it's so sometimes frustrating to see how many people spend their precious energy complaining about the algorithm when they can choose intentionally the content they want to put out there that will run circles around the algorithm because it's so good that people will share it despite what the algorithm is doing to it. Okay. Getting very passionate. Clearly, this is like, excuse me, it's the world that I feel not born into, but it's just, for me, it's not a business to talk about this stuff. It's all I know. It's what I do. And so I love it because it's something that I think is a great equalizer in terms of getting people's work exposed and opportunities created for yourself. But I think I was just sharing all of that context because when 2020 came, I had already felt this shift of like, well, I had done all of these things for myself, and every creator gets to that point where you are amassing, whether it's wealth, fame, opportunities, and all of it is inbound and it almost feels very effortless. And at some point you say, well, what's the legacy? What's the impact for others? And you start to want to turn that around. Denzel Washington had a beautiful quote saying the first quarter of your life is about learning as many skills as possible. Second quarter is about earning as much as possible. The third quarter is about returning based off of the abundance of what you've been given. And I feel like I got to that return era right before I hit 30, which feels very young. Like most people are still like trying to hustle and earn as much money as possible. And I was like, no, I think I'm ready to give something back. And naturally, I just felt called to teach and to show people a different way to do entrepreneurship, business, marketing. And I think the outlier, I became an outlier in the way that I showed up because I was doing different, deeper, and more than others. And again, this is no shade against business coaches, but those who start a business coaching practice for the money will always do just enough to get you, whatever they promised. Those who live like what they do and love what they do, you're always going to get more because they geek out about the process and they're a student to the industry. So out of an abundance of love for what they do, they're always going to try to give you as much as possible because they genuinely want to see you win and get you those results. So I felt like I was like on the receiving end of a lot of people who had been maybe burnt by other coaches who maybe didn't deliver on their promises or did just enough, or you could tell that they didn't actually really love teaching. So I was almost like trying to bring hope back into the industry and show people that yes, there are coaches that can care about you, and yes, there are ways that you can do things differently that doesn't put you as just like another rat on the hamster wheel. And yeah, so it was, again, just really fun. And I think with all of this, I have learned that there is never going to be a shortage of opportunity for the person that puts themselves out there. And you have to decide, what am I willing to do with my time? How am I wanting to spend my precious limited energy? And in what way is my legacy going to be built? Because your legacy isn't what you say about yourself. It's what others say when you're not in the room. And just being conscious and intentional about your work representing that is a big part of your journey. So when I, stopped the travel blogging for a little bit to kind of build the coaching practice and not focus on my business and help other people with theirs, I kind of also put my dream of living abroad on hold because I wasn't sure where I was going to live. And yet there was no one city or country that spoke to me. And yeah, I felt like I kind of let that dream die down a little bit. And I was single, so I was just okay, well, I guess I also got a date in the US, which was traumatic. Just horrible. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to be single because the options weren't that great. And even basic thing. And my list wasn't super superficial. 6 figures. it was like, has passport. And not even like, even if they didn't have a passport, I'm like, you could change that. So that even wasn't a deal breaker. But just the desire to see what was beyond your own world or zip code. Anyways, I share all of that because just this dream of living abroad felt less and less like a possibility because the US felt easy, comfortable, safe, friends and family were there, and I could just, travel as often as I wanted. So I didn't have any calling to one specific country, so I just felt like I no longer thought that living abroad full time was going to be for me. So to now be living full time between Europe and Asia, it just feels like, oh, this was always in the plan. I just had to wait on God's timing. And it's a beautiful thing. Like, there's a quote that says, if this is what you can do, wait till you see what God can do. And I promise you, every single time you wait on His timing or you wait on His plan to come to fruition, you will be amazed at how much better it is than any plan that you could have conceived yourself. So I am just sitting in awe, not just of this year, but of this life, because it's so much better than I desired and dreamt for myself. And I'm just really, really grateful. And 2025, thrive in 2025. Like it's my word for 2025. I'll probably announce it next video, but I think I have what it is. This year was experiment, and I talked about each month was a different experiment with hair, veganism, launch strategy, content style. And next year we'll kind of follow the same format where the word will dictate kind of what I do each month around a different topic. So I'm just really excited about that. And I'm going to actually continue this weekly series, and I think I'm going to do it around a specific topic, which I'm very excited about. I've also been working on a new ebook about that same topic, which again, I love to create. So it's really exciting when I'm working on a new creation because it allows me to geek out about something, but for other people to benefit from my geekiness. And yeah, it's a beautiful time, and I'm just really grateful. So I will continue watching my videos probably all week, reliving my year and remembering what it's like to be doing this human experience. And to hold space for the complexity of human emotion is one of the most beautiful, humbling things that you can do. And I'm just in awe of this life. I'm not on my meds, so if I was, that's me. I guess I'll quickly share the ADHD medication update. I'm probably at 1 or 2 times a week that I'm taking it. I go back for a kind of follow-up of like, we might switch out some things next month. But so far, like what I recognize is it just turns off the part of your brain that gets foggy when you have to execute on something. I think with an ADHD brain or a neurodivergent brain, you have a task, but for some reason your brain built it up to be this mountain. Like it is just, like maybe all you have to do is, again, this is a very random example, but the only thing you have to do is like wash the dishes. But for some reason, you cannot get yourself to lift a single plate. It just feels like circumstances have to be perfect in order for you to feel worthy of starting that task. And so you'll do everything but attempt to wash the dish because you don't feel like it's going to be accomplished unless these other 10 things are. And it's this overwhelming spiral. So like imagine dishes and then imagine like 20 other tasks during the day that need to be done, but you've built the mountain. So with an ADHD medication, it just removes that like feeling of dread and that feeling of this is impossible. And you just walk up to the sink and you just do it. It's the strangest, I'm like, wow, this really is what it's like to be neurotypical. it also kind of shuts off your emotion. And I think this is the biggest reason why some people don't desire medication and try to work through it naturally. I watched the Jamie Foxx special and I learned that he has ADHD, and it makes so much sense because he's so talented and so dynamic. And I feel like most ADHD people have that gift of just being incredibly dynamic and talented. But you have to decide what part of you do you want to maintain and like continue to suffer the consequences of. And for me, my best artistry comes out of my chaotic ADHD brain. So on days that I want to create, even though I might feel that block and that overwhelm, I allow myself to work through it naturally because I don't want to turn off the emotional part of my brain that my art benefits from. So I'm very cautious of how I self-medicate. And, I've cut out caffeine. I've cut out a lot of things. So I'm really just, I feel like as, I'm just raw dogging life. There's nothing in my system. So I feel like I'm just very intentional about how I do it. And I'll keep sharing, even on Instagram, like this medication process for those who feel like they need medication for themselves or for their kids, and the benefits and maybe consequences of using it. They do say it makes you more irritable. And again, because it shuts off that emotional side that is deeply empathic, because ADHD people have that deep empathy, it makes you just more focused on the goal now. It's like you're like, no, if something comes in the way of those dishes, you're now irritated by like, how dare you disrupt this task that is the most important thing in the world. So it turns you into a little bit of a drill sergeant, which is, again, you got to be careful how you use it. So I'm like grateful that I've only used it in like safe spaces where I'm like with people that know me, love me, can hold space for all of me. And I've also like shared my journey of like, hey, I think I'm going to take the medication in an hour, or I think I'm going to take it today, or I think I'm going to take it tomorrow, just so they can also hold space and witness the fluctuation of who they know me to be while I'm experimenting and while I'm figuring out what makes the most sense. Okay, I'm glad I re-recorded this, because I feel like I got through more stuff than the first time. The first time I really rambled. This time I rambled only slightly. I rambled, but not as much as the first time. So this is meant to happen. All right, y'all. See you next week. And yeah, I hope this quality is much better than the Zoom video. But we'll be back to Sony videos next year. My Sony camera, I think it's in Bangkok. So I'll have to, yeah, we'll see. Thanks for watching. Bye.